Hi, this is Sandra, and in this video we're going to look at what you need to know for interfaces for the Oracle Java exam, Programmer 1 exam. So firstly, if you read about interfaces, it's going to say that an interface is like a contract. It defines what a class should do. So to try and explain that a little bit better, I have the API open and I'm in the Java Lang package. And here are the interfaces that are in the Java Lang package. So somebody's classes that you use might implement one of these interfaces. So you would see public class, whatever, CD implements clonable. So I can say, oh, well, if it implements clonable, I know it's going to have a clone method in it so that I can make copies of that CD. So it defines a little bit of contract, or a little bit more information about what it can do. Like if I know that a class implements auto-closable, I'll go, oh, okay, so it's implemented the close method and I can use it with the try root resources to automatically close. It gives more information about what the class can do. Another one, iteratable. If a class implements iteratable, I know I can loop through it with the for loop. So it's giving me a little bit more information. And is there another one there? Character sequence, it can be read by character stream. Okay, and that's about it. Now, so an interface, a class can extend only from one class. So it can only have one parent, but it can implement many interfaces. So say for the likes of comparable, if I go in here and go down into this interface, you'll see that there is only one method in here. So if a class implements comparable, I know that it has to have implemented that compare to method. And now say if CD is comparable and I create my copies of a CD or instantiate CD objects, and I know that the person who wrote that class, CD class, implements comparable, I know that it'll have implemented a compare to method, and therefore the objects can be compared against each other to say maybe what order they appear in the alphabet or something like that. So the compare to method would determine how that's implemented. So it's like a little bit of a contract. So what I want to show you how to do is what are in these interfaces. So the ones that, most of them here probably only have one method in them. So I want to show you what could go into those interfaces. So I'm going into code that I've used earlier on in the course. And I'm going to look at, I have a circle class, or let's say I have a shape parent class. And a shape could have a color, getting set for color, and it has a draw method. Now, like interfaces, a class can have a method in it that can be abstract, and that means any child class must implement that method. This is in a class, and if you've got an abstract method, the class has to be abstract. An interface, any methods in an interface are abstract. Most of them are abstract, I'll get to that. Majority of the methods in an interface are abstract, and a class that implements the interface has to implement that method. Now, I'm going to say the circle class. I'm going to create an interface that the circle class is going to implement, and I'm going to say that a circle can be bounceable, and if a circle is bounceable, then I'm going to add in a method just to say how bouncy it is. I'm just finding there, what am I going to call that method? So I'm going to have a get bounciness. So what I'm going to do first of all, I'm going to right click and create a new interface. Now, the name of this one's going to be bounceable, and click on finish. Now, the first thing here is a method or an interface can be public, or with that keyword removed, it can have default access. So my next video will be looking at all the public, private, and protected, and so on. So a top level class or interface can be public or default. Now, if I put a method in here, so if I put in, I was going to have a return an int, get, and excuse my spelling, get bounciness. So what it's going to do is this method, there we go. So firstly, just leave that not working at the minute. Any methods, apart from a default or static, we'll get to that later, that they were new added in Java 8. So any method prior to Java 8, any method you add in by default is public and it is abstract. So if you want, you could put in public, you could put in abstract, but you don't have to. You'll get those keywords on a method that's not default or static. You'll get those keywords anyway. Now, with an abstract method, it can't have a body. So if I put in a body, it doesn't compile, has to end in a semicolon. So firstly, these regular methods I put in by default are public, they're abstract. You can put in public and abstract keywords if you want. They cannot have a body. Now I'm going to save that, and my circle class now is going to extend shape, and it's going to implement that interface bounceable. Now, straight away, when I implement that bounceable interface, my class won't compile, simply because bounceable has one abstract method in it, and a class that implements this interface has to implement that method. So back here, circle won't compile until that method's put in. So I'm just going to pop it in here, and I'm just going to copy the signature to make sure that I get it right. Returns an int, copy that, returns an int, it's called get bounciness. Now, when you implement a method, you have to put the body in. The other option is that I could make that, this is a kind of an aside, but you'll need to note for your exam as well. Abstract, you can put public in here for a minute. An abstract method cannot have a body. An abstract method then must go into an abstract class. So this is a little bit off topic for what I'm covering, but you'll need to know that as well. So I'm going to put that back to what I want there in a second. But when a class implements an interface, it must either provide an implementation, a body for that method from the interface, or it can make the method abstract. Now I'm forcing child classes to implement it, and if a method is abstract, it must be in a class that's abstract. So that's forcing a child class to implement it. So the rule is, if you implement, or the first concrete class, so non-abstract, or the first concrete class must implement the methods that are in it, or if I add in abstract, it's not a concrete class now, it's there to be extended, and therefore that method can be abstract. Okay, so that's one rule. I'm going to take out these abstract keywords, and when I implement it, a non-abstract method has to have a body. I'll pop in the body, and then there's another thing here. I'm just going to return 1 there for a second, just to keep that, the return value, keep it quiet for that. But there's another rule here. You can't reduce the visibility. So the method in the interface, whether you put in public or not, and take that out, the method in interface by default is public. And when you implement it, it can't be less visible. So public in the parent, public in the child. That's the way that goes. I can't make it default or private. Now, so that has implemented that method. So there's lots of rules here. A method in an interface by default is public and abstract. I can take that out. By default, public and abstract. So I'll just write that in there. Public and abstract by default. An abstract method cannot have a body. Abstract method cannot have a body. And then when the child class, so this implements bounceable, that makes it a child class, it must implement any methods from that interface and can't be less visible. So I just pause and type in. Now, so just typed up a couple of notes here. So this class must implement the method from the interface, so the get bounciness method, or the alternative is it can make this method abstract, and then the circle class would also have to be made abstract, and then it wouldn't have a body. So that's watch out for exam questions on that. A method in an interface is public by default. When you implement it, or another word for that is override it here, you cannot make this method less visible, so it must be public too. Now, back to the interface. So far in the interface, we have a method. We can also put in variables. So I'm going to just type in a few here. Small bounce. Small bounce is 1. I just type in 2 more here. Okay, so I've typed in 3 variables here: small bounce, medium bounce, and large bounce. Variables in an interface are by default public, static, and final. You don't have to type it in. You could type in one of those keywords, all of them, none of them, but any variables that you put in will be public, static, and final. So that means public can be seen outside the class, so can be used by any other class. Static, it belongs to this. Now I'm saying class, but it belongs to this class, belongs to this interface. And something that's static, to use it outside of this interface, or even if it were in a class, it'd be the class name or interface name dot the variable name. So bounceable dot small bounce. Final means once it's assigned a value, I can't change the value of that variable elsewhere. Okay, and then the child class can make use of that. Now I have my get bounciness. So now I could use that variable from the interface. Let's go with medium bounce. Use control space to finish it. Now I could put in there the interface name bounceable dot medium bounce, but a class that implements that interface will inherit those variables. So you could, if you want, put in bounceable dot before that, but it is inherited. Now, just to show you there as well that the variables in the bounceable interface are inherited here by the circle class. They are final, which means I can't change the value of them, but just say I tried to say large bounce equals 3. So that wouldn't compile because I can't reassign or change the value of a final variable. So that is not allowed. So that's the final bit that's on the variables in the interface. Now, since Java 8, they've added in that an interface can have methods declared as default and also static methods. So they're new since Java 8. So what I'm going to add in here is a default method. Now, methods can only be default in an interface, not in a class. So default string get bounce speed. Now, default methods must have a body, so I'm just going to put in here return a string. It'll be a fast bounce. So default methods, they must have a body. They are inherited by, if I call it a child class, what I mean by that is a class that implements this interface. They are inherited, and if the circle class wants, it can override it and replace it with its own body. So that's a default method. Now, default methods, anything in an interface is public, so if you want, you could pop public in there. Because anything in an interface is public, I can't say that it's private or protected. That wouldn't be allowed. I can leave out the public keyword there as well. Anything here, this method, it can't be static, because that would change the meaning of it, and it can't be final, because final means it can't be overridden, but this method can be overridden. So it can't be static or final, and it can't be private or protected because by default it's public. So now that method can be used in the circle class if it wants to. So it's as if it'll be typed into the circle class, get bounce speed, it will return fast bounce if it's called on a circle object, and then as I said, the circle class can override it if it wants to. Now, since Java 8, there's one other type of method that can be added into an interface, and that is a static method. So I'm really running out of names now here, but let's pop in a static method. So it's static. This one I will return maybe an int, and we'll call it get, I don't know, bounce height. And I'm running out of things here. Get bounce height. Now, so static method has a body. Let me see, just return, I could use one of the constants above, get bounce height, let's put in, I think there are 5. Now, so again, anything in an interface by default is public. With the static method, the difference is a static method in a class is inherited by child classes. This static method, it's not inherited, as in it's not visible. In the circle class, this method, it won't be visible in the circle class. And if you want to call it outside of the interface, you must call it bounceable dot get bounce height. So that is how that static method will be called. Now, so I don't know if these methods are used a great deal, but of course they might appear on your exam. Now, just to show you how that would be used, so get bounce height. In my circle class, I have that get bounciness, return medium bounce. What did I just do a print out here? So print out, it is called get bounce height. I just print out here, circle, bouncing with a bounce height, of, and just to show you there, I'm just going to copy the name of that just to show you that it's not inherited, so it's not like it's copied into the circle class. And if I pop that in here, that won't compile. So if I want to use it, I need to put the interface name there before it. That's bounceable dot. Okay, so just a very quick review there on what we've done. So in an interface can have regular methods that used to always be put in. They're public, they're abstract by default, they're public and abstract. No body must be implemented by a class that implements that interface, or the first non-abstract class that implements that interface. Variables can be added in. There are constants, they're final, so they're constants, so traditionally they're being capital letters. They're public, they're static, they're final, whether you put those keywords in or not. Since Java 8, you can have a default method. The default method can be inherited by child classes. They can implement it, replace it if they want to, or they can just use it as it is. And then static methods, they belong in this interface. They're not inherited by the child class. So if the child class wants to make use of it, it'll need to say bounceable dot get bounce height. And that is it. There's a couple of bits that I'll look at there just for the exam question, a couple of little tricky ones, but I'll add those into a separate video. Thank you.